All right. Sorry about that. So, I actually got done seeing James Gunn's Superman last night. And I wanted to upload a review literally as soon as I got home, but I wanted to let it marinate a little bit because I was a bit conflicted about this movie. Just a bit. For starters, I was a big Zack Snyder fan. I have a poster from this Full Circle event right there signed by him. And I wanted the Snyderverse to continue. I always thought that version of Superman based on stoicism was a very interesting depiction. And that world was wholeheartedly unique when compared to Marvel. And James Gunn, I love him. I love his work. But he has a formula. Get a bunch of misfits together, put in some music and some shouting, and bada bing, bada boom, you have a hit movie or a hit miniseries. I was a little nervous that he was going to be tackling Superman because he seems like one of the most immature filmmakers in terms of his humor, not in terms of who he is as a person. And I just didn't feel that his style would work well with Superman. And, it seemed a bit confusing because essentially some elements of the DCEU do carry over here, but it's basically everything that only he touched. So, with all that being said, how is this movie? Well, I can confidently say that, yes, I do believe a man can fly when you look up. It is a solid Superman story, if not a little messy. It's easy like a 7-8 out of 10. It's definitely not perfect, but considering what this movie needs to be, I think it actually nails it pretty well. First, the good. Every actor brings a great performance. David Cornswet, the guy who plays Superman, he and Lois, the actress that plays Lois, has phenomenal chemistry. They work so well off of one another. And Nicholas Hoult is an absolute bastard as Lex Luthor, and I mean that in the best way possible. He already has become the most definitive version of Lex, by far. And this movie has a lot of heart. It definitely focuses on the idea of hope and what it means to be Superman, at least on a surface level iteration. And I believe that, the story that it is trying to tell tells it very, very well. The visual effects are phenomenal. The action is pretty damn good. The music is surprisingly very uplifting. Despite the fact it is partially inspired by John Williams, it still manages to stand on its own, at least in a way that is somewhat sufficient. And overall, even James Gunn's direction and writing, for the most part, is really, really good. This isn't the same James Gunn that did Guardians of the Galaxy or the Suicide Squad. This is a much more mature and very pulled back, for the most part, version of James Gunn. It's clear that the way they handle Superman here, he actually understands the character. And to a large degree, the universe itself. You see, what's really interesting here is that with the MCU, the world building happens as we progress, and see it through the eyes of these characters. Here, it's a little different, actually. What's more unique is, and it's one of the things that I actually kind of like, this has the same feel as Bruce Timm's animated universe of DC characters, or the DCAU, the DC animated universe, from like the early 90s all the way to the late 2000s. Essentially, the world already exists, and the way these characters act within the confines of this universe is a reflection of the universe. The universe isn't a reflection of these characters. The reflection of these characters is from the universe. So this is already a pre-established, sufficient, universe filled with its own lore that, the movie doesn't take the time to sit you down and actually tell you everything about this world. You're just meant to piece it together with the opening crawl, images in the background, the way people talk. And that's really a lot of what this movie is. It's laying down groundwork. This is about a 65 to 70% Superman story, and the rest of it is just establishing this new DC universe. For God's sakes, you have moments where Lois Lane talks about a multidimensional rift, brought upon by an interdimensional loop like wormhole, and they just say this shit so casually. Not only that, but what's rather interesting, and you see it in the trailer, is that a monster shows up, like a big kaiju shows up, and everyone just has their phone out. And you'd think, what are you doing? Get the fuck out of the way. But that's us thinking from a realistic perspective, how we would react in our world. This is not how we're not in that world. This is the DC world. You know, a monster attack in Metropolis, that's just another week, you know? It's Thursday, 4:00, Metropolis time. Oh, look at that giant fucking monster, you know? Oh, this might set me back a couple of days. And you know, even the side characters, like Guy Gardner, Mr. Terrific, and Hawkgirl, who are in the movie. Mr. Terrific, probably more so. But they are also a reflection of this world as well. It's really interesting. You know, a lot of the praise that I have for this movie doesn't just come from it being a Superman movie, but laying the groundwork for the DC universe. There was the best way I can describe this movie. There was a review by Scott Mendelson from, I think, way back in 2017 or like maybe even 2020, where he talks about Justice League. Not Justice League, Justice League, the theatrical version of that fucking abomination. And he talks about how, you know, these movies should feel like a Saturday morning cartoon. And Zack Snyder said, well, if you want, like this, my movie is meant for grown-ups. If you want your Saturday morning cartoon, you can have it. You know, and Justice League is a Saturday morning cartoon in the worst possible way. This is a Saturday morning cartoon in the best possible way. It's meant for all ages, you know. It's sure it may appeal more to kids than it does to adults, but it has universal themes and universal handlings of a lot of these ideas that anybody can get into it. And what's even better is that I never once felt lost. I never once felt like I didn't understand what was going on or, you know, trying to get a grasp of this world. It's already established, and it's done so in a way where you can piece it together. But going back to the whole Superman thing, yes, despite the fact that there's a lot of side characters, and by the way, Mr. Terrific does steal most of this movie. He is phenomenal, as you know, and he's played phenomenally by the guy who played the mutant that doesn't die and then dies in X-Men First Class. He is given his due diligence in this movie. And like I said before as well, James Gunn actually does pull back considerably, about like 80% on his style here. Sure, his camera work screams James Gunn, but there's only one moment where he actually drops a pop song in during a fight, and it's with Mr. Terrific, and it works really well. But a lot of the movie has an orchestral score, and it for the most part pulls back on the humor. And now we kind of get into the bad elements of this movie, which is, unfortunately, James Gunn still gets in his way. There is a lot of unnecessary humor that completely undermines most of the serious tones. Anytime there is a joke, about 9 times out of 10, you chuckle, but then you go, well, fuck, this just ruins the whole bit. And a lot of that is on the back of Crypto. Crypto has a lot of phenomenal scenes, a lot of great action sequences with Crypto in it, but then it ends with him pulling some shit, and it's like, are you fucking kidding me? I don't want this, James. I don't want this humor. You've done, like, this movie does have a light tone, but it doesn't need the humor. And it's like, I respect him, you know? He has very much matured since his tweets. Just saying. But even then, those impulses just can't quite seem to leave him. And on top of that, you know, the movie is a bit messy. You know, it seems like at first this was kind of framed as like a day in the life of Superman, or a week in the life of Superman. And you can very much tell, like I said, you know, this world is a reflection that like the characters here are a reflection of this world, and you're plopped right in the middle of just another week for Superman. And at times it is very much like that. This doesn't necessarily have the most cohesive of narratives. It really does feel like a day-to-day for Superman at times. And even then, the beginning is a little messy, a little choppy, because the pacing can sometimes be a little wonky. Because remember, this movie's job is to also lay down the groundwork for essentially everything that comes later. Yeah, Creature Commandos was essentially our first real our first introduction to the DCU, but this is the first real introduction. If the Creature Commandos was the outside of the house, then Superman is stepping inside and exploring. And unfortunately, at times there are moments where you're just kind of left scratching your head like, wait a minute, why is this happening? Okay, yeah, I forgot that's how these characters would act because this is the world that's been presented to us. But that's not just it. There's also a major creative decision that was done with Clark's, Kryptonian parents that they do dwell on a little bit, but it's never enough to where you can fully dissect it. I get what they were trying to go for. I really do. And honestly, it's something similar that's been seen in shows like Invincible and even My Adventures with Superman. These are ideas that I think would work really, really well for a Superman story, especially when dealing with his Kryptonian heritage. But unfortunately, a lot of themes here are basically presented at surface level and then just never quite explored in depth. Say what you will about Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and even Zack Snyder's Justice League. Despite the fact this movie has more heart than those movies, one thing those movies do better is actually deeply exploring certain themes, such as what is it like a hero acting unilaterally. They have an interview sequence that is really good. It lasts probably about 5 or so, maybe 10 minutes. And it's really good, but then it just never really goes anywhere with it, There's a lot of surface level ideas in large chunks of this movie that are explored for maybe a minute or two before it being completely dropped. And it does become a bit frustrating. They do enough to at least scratch that itch, but you're still a little itchy because they do such a good job almost conveying these ideas and themes, but then they just never fully go into it. This feels a lot like it would have been a 2.5-hour movie that got shaved down to 2 hours. And it is frustrating. And that's really what I can say about this movie. That is its biggest downside, is that it is a frustrating watch at times because this movie does move at a breakneck speed. But due to that, there are times where we're not allowed to fully envelop some ideas presented to us, or even given a break to just think about, the consequences of some of these actions. Things are brought up and then dropped. It is frustrating at times. It doesn't defeat the overall experience. I cannot stress that enough. It doesn't defeat the overall experience. This is still a fun watch, and it's still pretty damn good. As a matter of fact, this is very much probably the best Superman movie that we have ever gotten. Say what you will about Richard Donner or Zack Snyder, but James Gunn, I think, has captured the essence of Superman in a way that I don't think I've seen in a while. Man of Steel can be seen as an Elseworld Superman. And I've always enjoyed that. I've always liked alternative takes. This is very much a comic book movie. I have ripped out a comic, thrown it on screen, and you're going to fucking watch it. And it is good. It is a very, very, very good movie. I just wish it was better, Still solid. Don't get me wrong. This is a solid movie, and I highly recommend you see it in an IMAX theater because the action sequences, the roaring score, David's ability to encapsulate Superman, and Nicholas Hoult as an evil rat bastard of a Lex Luthor, it all deserves to be seen on the biggest screen possible. And there are a lot of fun cameos. People show up. Actually, you want to know what? Before I even go into all that, that is a detriment, but also an upside. This movie is filled with cameos. Not in a haha, oh my god, oh, it's them cameo, like a, oh, these are characters that were announced and then show up. Like, it makes sense. And it's, it's very much a, whoa, at times. But also on top of that, you also have a lot of big name actors that show up in this movie as bit parts. It goes back to that whole reason why Oppenheimer, Asteroid City, and even the other Wes Anderson movie, the Kansas, the French Dispatch. You have so many big name actors, and they are in your movie for like less than a minute, or even then less than 5 minutes, and then they're just gone. Like, I think at this point it's all but confirmed. Bradley Cooper is in this movie. Doesn't speak English, speaks Kryptonian. He is in this movie for probably 3 minutes. And on top of that, you have other big name actors and they're in for one scene and then out the next. And I get it, this is the DC universe. This is a big world filled with a lot of characters, so you're allowed to have people stop in, show up, say hi, and then leave. It makes the world feel a lot bigger and connected. But it's still somewhat of a jarring experience when you're like, wait, hold on, what are you doing? Oh, you're gone? Okay, well, fuck, why are you here? I mean, I get why you're here, but can you come back? Oh, right, I forgot, this movie's not about you. It's... The best way I can describe it is that there are times in, like, Spider-Man comics where Daredevil just shows up for, like, 2 or 3 panels and then F's off to go to his own story. There's a couple scenes like that here where huge characters pop up, say hi, and then fuck off to what clearly is going to be a TV series premiering on HBO Max probably in the next couple of months. But I have gotten far too ahead of myself because I do feel like I might be bagging a little too much on this movie. And honestly, it's because it's Superman, Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, these are the biggest superheroes ever. Their cultural significance in our zeitgeist is massive, to put it kindly. So, of course, expectations for this movie were high, especially considering James Gunn's previous track record with Guardians of the Galaxy, Suicide Squad, Creature Commandos, Peacemaker, and, I mean, for God's sakes... It's still a phenomenal movie. Definitely not excellent, but it's very, very good. The lowest I'll give it is like a 7. The highest I'll give it is an 8. It is a good start. And on top of that, yes, there are 2 end credit scenes, but they don't lead into anything. They're just fun little seasonings added to this movie. There's no sequel bait. There is a little bit. There's 2 moments where it's like, oh, right, I forgot that's coming out. It doesn't, but here's the thing. They're not framed in a way where it's like, oh, be sure to check in. It's just, hey, these characters are here. Okay, yeah, they're gone. You want to know where they're going? They're going to be on this show, but you don't need to watch it to understand or anything. It's nice. This movie actually does have a lot of restraint, and I think that should be praised. I think so. There's no sequel baiting, and there's no, over nostalgia. Sure, the theme is there, but there's never an overt need for nostalgia. There's a lot of restraint that was done with this movie, both from a studio angle and from a creative angle, and I respect them for that. And quite frankly, if this is where the DCU is going to be going from here on out, then yeah, I think DC is in good hands with James Gunn.